Thank you for joining us for the Arts and Democracy podcast, a global conversation with Olga Levina. For the free world to protect democracy, we have to explore and understand what democracy is, why it is so important to protect, and how democracies rise and fall throughout the history of humanity, what its promise is, and what role do the arts play in a democratic society. Now, please welcome our host, Olga Levina.
Hello, everyone. Arts and Democracy, Olga Levina is here. It's our new, fresh, first-time podcast. I believe that time is now to talk about what place, what role arts and history and our museums play in democracy. And today with us, our first guest. Thank you, Tom Goehner. Please welcome, Tom, to our first podcast. Thank you for
Thank you, Olga. It's good to be here. As you said, my name is Tom Goehner. I'm a retired museum educator that's been working in and around museums and cultural organizations, history museums, and the like in Washington, D.C. for 30 years. And it's great to be part of this inaugural broadcast and podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we were talking about engaging audiences, diverse audiences
Diverse
at the
audiences,
Smithsonian.
yes, because this is Jersey City Theater Center's mission to engage diverse audience in our programming. And if you go on our website, you see Korea, Ukraine, of course, United States. So it's very, very diverse. And I would like to learn what you discovered in Smithsonian Museum, because it's not that easy to bring diverse audience to museum, to art center.
Yeah, and they still haven't figured it out, I'm sure, all of it. But what I will say is that accessibility, just physically getting to museum on the mall, one of the biggest line items in my budget was for buses and trying to get kids out of school. We're talking about school-age children. So there are only about 100,000 students in the District of Columbia, largely probably one of the more diverse school communities in the country. And yet there was money to send them to football games on a school bus. And I see you nod your head, not much money to bring them to see a world-class art institution in their backyard. The other thing I would say is that recruiting volunteers that look like the people that you wanted to attract was a big push. Most of our docents were upper middle class white women with a certain level of education and a passion for art and teaching. Many retired teachers, professionals all, and good people. And they were the ones that had the leisure to engage and do these sorts of things. Other groups, not as plentiful with those types of resources to volunteerism at an art institution or a history organization. Much harder to recruit if your job is to recruit these volunteers. And if they do have volunteers, they have other priorities, many of them health or other related priority pieces of the community that are in need. And then the stuff itself, do the artifacts attract this kind of audience? And that depends on what you're exhibiting. Of course, if you're exhibiting Japanese textiles, the Japanese community will show out in full force to support it. And that is gratifying. So it goes all the way back to what you choose to put out there, as well as attracting the kinds of volunteers and infrastructure where they see people like themselves, where they feel comfortable walking through that door, where people like you and me, we don't even hesitate. We feel like we're entitled to be there. Other people don't have that same experience of being welcomed. The other last thing I would say is that not all groups behave the same. Not all, let's say not all high school teenagers are the same. They may want to be in their minds, but they are not acting in mass. They don't all behave the same way or learn the same way. So being ready for the diversity of each person's experience within a larger demographic is also key. Not all old people, people over 65, people in their mid 50s, myself, think or act or have the same politics across the board. Be prepared for that diversity yourself. Now that you've attracted it, what are you going to do? And so that is the sort of the nugget of what, as institutions as big as Smithsonian and as small as your community museum, grapple with.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So, Tom, what is one project from your Smithsonian time that is still resonates with you today and that you are very proud of?
There are so many exhibitions that I worked on, from Ansel Adams, a world famous photographer, to Edward Hopper, to some household names in the art world. But the project that I think I'm most proud of being involved with, and it was way beyond me. There were many departments and many colleagues involved, that I had a part in it was great, was putting together a series of curriculum guides for classroom media centers based on different segments of the Smithsonian American Art collection. And so the first one I worked on was landscape and the American landscape painting. That is a huge tradition in this country from its founding all the way to contemporary landscape photography. And the point wasn't to show just how much stuff or how good it was that we had, or be connoisseurs of these types of paintings and collections, but to connect them to the high school curriculum that was being taught around the country, and then to disseminate them out. It doesn't do much good if the only place you can see these paintings are in Washington, D.C., but to put together media kits that could be in every media library across the country. And looking back at them now, they look pretty obsolete. They're VHS videos of our collection that were part of the kit, slides. I don't think anybody even knows how to use those. And then a publication and lesson plans for the teachers to use in the classroom. We were trying to get the art in the classroom across the country. And so it was
why museum chose landscapes?
Because we got money.
For landscapes, for nature.
We did an exhibition called Landscape Interhistory, talking about the Hudson River School all the way to the American West. So that material was assembled in essence. So a lot of the grunt work of picking and choosing had been done. There was one of the Bell telephone companies chose to give us some money for this project as a pilot. And so those were purely pragmatic reasons, but no less important. And then we thought that it would clearly connect when we did some research on what was being taught about manifest destiny and other aspects of American history, that it would connect. And we knew that art history wasn't being taught in 5th and 6th grade, but American history was. And so we chose that approach.
This year, the Smithsonian has been under intense scrutiny with the Trump administration, and we all know that. Calling for review of exhibits. When it all happened, what was your first reaction to that executive order?
So I hate to say it, but I was not surprised. The Smithsonian sister institutions, like the National Archives, had already given us a preview of coming attractions, to put it sarcastically, of what you could expect to happen at the Library of Congress, at the Kennedy Center, at the National Archives. And so I was not surprised that the administration in the White House put the Smithsonian next in its sights to overhaul to its liking. This is not to say, and the other thing I will say is, this is not the first time there's been political controversy at the Smithsonian especially. It is a federally funded complex of 19 museums that is funded through the Department of the Interior. So its money comes from Congress. In effect, there is a board of regents that are, but the real power, the money, comes from Congress. So Congress, in effect, is the board of trustees. So you can imagine that it's a miracle that 19 museums keep chugging along when they answer to over almost 400 different constituents for their purse. Back when I was starting in my museum career, starting at Smithsonian, there was a huge controversy about an exhibit about the Enola Gay airplane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima during World War II. And they were using the curators involved and the people writing the copy that appeared next to that piece that belongs to the Smithsonian, to that aircraft. The gospel of that bombing, the history, the accepted history until that point, had been that these bombs were necessary to drop in order to shorten the war and save lives. And then there was new scholarship that was emerging that these curators and others wanted to use that said that that may not necessarily have been the case, that this, the data didn't prove that by dropping these bombs, it would save lives and shorten the war. Their evidence didn't all bear that out, according to them. And so once that exhibit went up, there was a huge blowback, especially from veterans groups from World War II, who at the time were very much with us and had a great deal of power and influence in Congress. And what ultimately was decided after a lot of hand-wringing among curators and, accusations of censorship and stifling the discussion at a federally funded museum paid by taxpayers, was that maybe an exhibition where you had a static display and label copy for something so controversial wasn't the way to handle this new scholarship or these new thoughts. And that is how the secretary, the head of the Smithsonian, came down on this. People can fact check me on all of these details. This is just from purely off the top of my head. But I remember that this controversy vividly, and there was a lot of discussion and fallout from that our premier institution, the most visited museum on the mall, could showcase this kind of, in some people's eyes, erroneous fallacy about the role and make America look bad, like an aggressor. So what's different now is that this isn't just an argument about a particular exhibit. If things go the way that where they may be headed, this will be an across the board review. Every exhibit will get scrutiny. And if it doesn't align with the ideas or the ideals of what an American museum enterprise should be, then they will be scotched. People will lose their jobs. They already are, or silenced. And that new scholarship will be pushed away or never see the light of day. And in an extreme sense, you can see that happening in other institutions like the NIH or the CDC, where people with fringe ideas of vaccines and certain medical scholarship are being pushed to the fore. People with accepted, and I don't put quotes around that, notions of science and medicine are being pushed out or silenced. What you might, in its most extreme and cynical sense, you might have somebody in charge of the United States Holocaust Memorial that's a Holocaust denier. That is hopefully not likely to happen. But if you follow the logic of where this administration is going, that could be in play. People who deny the efficacy of vaccines, people who deny the uglier truths about our history are going to be pushed out and silenced. And what you will get is a sort of banal, homogenized, sanitized version of American history and cultural and scientific enterprise.
So, Tom, what does it mean for the future if we sanitize our history? How do you see it?
I hope it doesn't come to that. But what happens is that people will go elsewhere um, to find out things, to find out the truth, whether the United States leads in things like scholarship and not just science and math, which get the most press, but academic, literary, historical, and art scholarship, we will be diminished and others will take over, or there will be an underground movement. This stuff will only be found in certain places and underground till something changes and it becomes acceptable again.
If 20 years ago, 15 years ago, somebody told me that something like this would be possible, I would say not in the United States. This is why I came here, but we're facing it, right? It's just, which brings me to another question. The administration has signed out exhibits on Title IX, Black history, immigration, and LGBTQ plus rights. Why are these stories vital to preserve in museum space?
So it seems for someone as old as myself that we were finally talking about it in different cultural realms, not just in literature, but in museums as well and other venues. The Native American experience, which has been documented, but largely from the perspective of white settlers who, in effect, conquered this country and relegated Native Americans to reservations and to the fringe of our national culture and society. So it feels for someone like me where, now there is a National Museum of Native American Heritage on the National Mall, that we opened a National Museum in 2016 about the African American experience in this country, that we were making strides. We had devoted huge resources, put our museums on the best real estate, in effect, in America. And now there's this retreat, this complaint or this idea that those communities and the LGBTQ community didn't deserve space in these hallowed places is not new. There were naysayers all along, especially for the African American History Museum. There was something called, what are we going to have down the road? We'll have the balkanization, and that's the word, and you know more about that than I do, of the cultural enterprises of the Smithsonian. If we give everybody their own museum, this will be a mess. This will be terrible. You won't have a unified American experience, which I think the administration wants to lump us all together and go back to that idea of a mixing pot, when we all know it's more like a bouillabaisse, to use horrible food metaphors for things like this. But I see this as a trend that sort of reached a turning point. It's always been these competing ideas of museums serving the needs for different groups, different cultural groups within this country has always been around, but it ebbs and flows. And for a long time, the African American History Museum was a project that got funded and then defunded. And then, there was no going back. And then Oprah Winfrey writes big checks and then poof, well, not poof. What I'm saying is it took a long time to get here. And I felt like we had just, after breaking ground, there's no going back, but clearly there is going back. There is going to be, I fear, a retreat. My hope is that younger generations will realize that the mistakes that were made by those more senior people in power, and hopefully to rediscover the history that hopefully won't be erased, but will be out of view temporarily.
That leads me to democracy question, where our democracy stands in your eyes, in the eyes of history.
My first knee-jerk response is it is not only under threat, but it's disappearing. The rights that we had 5 years ago, particularly if you're a woman, particularly if you're a minority, any one of these groups is less than it was. So by anybody's measure, it is less. If you have eyes in your head, you can see that it is no longer just under threat. It is being rolled back, is my opinion. However, this is a tricky thing. It isn't the same for everybody, but I feel like I am one of those characters in a World War II movie that think there's still time to get out. And, the Gestapo is banging on the door, and you're like watching the movie and thinking, why didn't these people leave 6 months ago when they could get a visa and go? I'm not going anywhere, but I feel like I've seen this movie before and I kind of know how it goes. And my hope is that we can change the ending. I don't see a happy ending necessarily, but I hope for some sort of damage control that could get us back to where we were and build back better. I don't want to be a Pollyanna or over optimistic, but it's going to take time. These rights and traditions and norms that have taken only months to erase will take years to bring back.
So how should museum professionals, arts professionals balance this government oversight, government funding? Because I come from the history of that imbalance, right? Where history was erased, new history was written, and we had book about the book. So we would read Tolstoy, and there were explanation from the Soviet perspective of that book. So how do we balance and survive to better times? Do you have any suggestions, Tom?
I wish I had some concrete plan that I could roll out and say, here's what we do. During the Middle Ages, it was the monks that kept the scholarship and the Greek and Latin documents alive, hoarded away in monasteries throughout Europe. Even Muslim manuscripts and science and math were kept in these repositories. So I hope it doesn't become that kind of dark scattershot approach, but there is, even online among other like-minded individuals, a network of people that are keeping the data going, the research going, and it may no longer be funded by the United States government, but there are other people, other individuals with resources out there that can sustain us, hopefully, till we can get back to a place where all of this is possible. The danger is that, it's not about us anymore. We're too old. We remember too much. They're going after people much, much younger than us that are coming up through the educational system. And that's where I fear we need to retrench and teach the books, the scholarship, and the science that may be lost. Museums can play a role. Many of them are private, that rely on private funding and public donations. So much like organizations like NPR or the PBS, which has gone out of business, essentially, the public broadcasting service, there may be ways that other people, the Bloombergs of this country and others, can sustain us till we get back to. And, a lot of this scholarship, quite frankly, may move overseas to environments that are more tolerant, like our neighbors to the north, Canada. I'm holding out hope for them that sister countries that speak a version of American English could be our next route. I'm not trying to say all is lost, but while we come out with a plan, and somebody should be for museums and others, this may be the approach.
For all the cultural institutions that are on the same boat. And well, we funded by the state of New Jersey, so it helps. It helps a great deal, but the state is funded by NAA, which is in danger, and it's
Right.
more and more difficult to find philanthropists to donate enough of money so we can sustain our institutions, open new institutions. So it feels like we rely on government heavily.
Yeah.
Because philanthropy is not the same. Did you feel in institutions that that went down in the last 40 years? This is what I hear all the time.
It goes up and down, and it depends on where you are in the cultural landscape and who's in favor and who's not. And I remember an episode for the Corcoran Gallery of Art where they were attempting to exhibit work by Robert Mapplethorpe that came under fire because he had been sponsored by an NEA grant, and people like Senator Jesse Helms from the great state of North Carolina took extreme issue with the content and the graphicness of the photography. So that led to the elimination of grants for individual artists. It was too controversial. Other grant money went somewhere else because the money's always there. The resources and the people are there. It's just where they're directed. And I feel, will we all have to be like broadcast news organization that needs to now curry favor and do things that we ordinarily would despise just to survive out in the universe till things change? I don't know. Fortunately, I've never been in a position where I make those decisions, and I'm not affected by them personally now, but I'm certainly friends with people in the community of museums that are.
So, Tom, what if you had limited resources right now? What would you concentrate on as smaller cultural organization? It can be museum, it can be um, like theater center, any cultural smaller organization right now. What do you think in terms of programming would be your main focus?
The first thing I would do is try to ask the community what it wants.
Yeah.
We get so caught up in what we think is amazing in our collection or in our repertoire, but sometimes the people that we're trying to serve are not part of the conversation. And maybe that's a good place to begin. What is it you want from us, and how can we deliver it in a way that's accessible to you? And then if it's something they want, they will support it either in numbers or with funding, combinations of both. Other people will see a line going out the door, which we all pray for, to see this work of art or this performance. There are other enterprises and businesses that want to burnish their image with this community that buys things, borrows money from banks, uses telephones and cell phones. So I think the first step is what is it this community wants and needs?
I see. Thank you. What if you had unlimited amount of money? You would go to community first as well?
I would, because the whole point of these enterprises is not that I should be hanging exhibitions for my board members and myself, which, believe me, is a danger.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, and we have historical precedent for it. Hitler was building a gigantic museum for and of himself to hold all the things he looted and to sing his praises. So, the power hopefully won't go to my head, and we won't wind up with that. But what we would wind up with were excellence in artistic endeavor that's accessible to the most people. And that's what democratic institutions should be about, in my view.
Thank you. Thank you for this. Well, and finally, despite all the challenges, what gives you hope for the future of culture, of museums? What gives you hope? And maybe just in life, what gives you hope? What makes you wake up every morning, Ta?
I am hopeful, but I'm also realistic. This episode in our history is probably a blip on the radar of human history, world history. It's a nanosecond that must pass. It cannot last forever. And my hope is that others won't let it last forever, that they will see that it must come to an end and something better must take its place.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom. You just gave me hope.
I'm glad we could do that.
traveling to Poland and with everything that is happening all around the world. I don't know if you heard about Estonia yesterday, Poland,
Yes.
my Polish friends are also, and of course my Ukrainian family. Everybody is like, we don't know where to find that hope anymore, especially people of my generation who made some changes, who came out, and it was not enough. They came out of one regime and now they under another regime and wars. And so thank you. I really appreciate what you just said. And a bigger picture of history. This is just a small part of it. And we all probably play a little role in it, but it's still a very small part.
Thank you for joining us for the Arts and Democracy podcast, a global conversation with Olga Levina. The Arts and Democracy podcast is produced, recorded, and edited by Shane Austin Miller from Seize the Day Communications. Be sure to check out upcoming global arts performances and programs at Jersey City Theater Center. Until next time, support the arts and defend democracy.